All right, welcome everyone. Appreciate everyone showing up. My name's Chris Tremp. I'm the COO for SwyftOps, and we are excited to have Paradigm here with us. I did want to introduce, if you haven't known already, I believe we blasted this out, but we have a new vice president, basically of our sales and marketing side, Natasha Robertson. So she's joining us as well, and she's going to be handling our partnerships for us. So our vendor integrations or any kind of business partnership that we have, she's going to oversee. Paradigm would be one of those, and look to grow that out as far as we can. And she's the reason why we're having this webinar, and we're going to continue to have a series of webinar with our different vendor partners going forward. We met Paradigm really in our infancy, probably in our first year. I met Greg and discussed what they did. We were not big enough at the time, really. We didn't have any subscribers at the time to be able to work with Paradigm. Fast forward 3.5, 4 years. We have a nice market share. This is a great product, but really great people, great company. And we refer the heck out of them because they're so helpful on just such a heavy operational lift in terms of billing or even just getting credentialed with VA Medicaid. So I will pass it over to Greg and his team, and I hope that you all enjoy this. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Greg Bean. I'm our Vice President of Business Development here at Paradigm Senior Services. I'm joined by Melissa Mendez, who is our Manager of Educational Content, Growth, Pieces, Parts, everything that I know, learn, or do within Paradigm. She's kind of responsible for everything that happens within our business development department. So let me introduce you to her if you're following up or getting follow-up stuff after this. So when we're finished, we'll be able to send out to you a recap of this. The presentation that we're going to be putting out, we can share with you as well. So just so you know, everything we have that we're doing, if you're wanting to take notes or do follow-up or otherwise, this is something that Melissa will be reaching out to you folks and sharing with you all of our information when we're done. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to jump right in and get started. And then if you have questions, if you can just put them into the chat, we'll see if we have time when we're finished to actually get to those. If not, we'll respond to them on an individualized basis after the call is over. So what are we going to do today? We're going to talk a little bit about strategically building success through third-party payers and what does that mean. And I'll jump into an agenda. But for those of you that haven't had the chance or the opportunity to actually have a conversation with me in the past, just a quick brief, a little bit of my history. I was a Navy hospital corpsman, spent several years in the military, got out, went to nursing school, worked as a trauma and ER nurse, paramedic for several years. And then I know this says for the last 25 years, I've spent working in the skilled and private duty world. But as of June of this year, it will be my 30th year in the home care space. I've actually owned 2 private duty home cares, as well as working for multiple organizations across the industry, both administratively as well as staff, clinical, and so on. So it's something that I find near and dear to my heart. Just a quick brief when we start talking about the VA. One of the things that I like to share is, my great-grandfather was in the first European conflict. My grandfather and both of his brothers were in Germany during the Second World War. My grandfather was actually a prisoner of war in the Second World War and was in, for any Hogan's Heroes fans out there, he was in Stalag 13. They never actually had a tunnel out. They tried, didn't quite get there. My father was military, a couple of uncles in the Navy. I was Navy, my brother was Army, my sister was Air Force, my son-in-law Marine, my son is currently serving active duty in the United States Air Force. So when I talk about the VA, when I talk about growing your business, when I talk about the opportunities and how to actually leverage that back to your benefit, it's something that I aspire to actually help every veteran on the planet that I can. And I think we have a great opportunity within the industry to do so. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk about why we're diversifying our payer lines. We're going to talk about why there's a need. We're going to talk about some of the third-party payers that are out there. We're only going to touch on a few of them today. But one of the keys to this is there's so many more than the three we're going to touch. So we're going to talk about Medicaid, the VA, and Medicare Advantage, but we could be talking about workman's comp insurance. We could be talking about long-term care insurance. We could be talking about multiple other opportunities. We're only going to touch on a few, but we're going to talk about how diversification can affect you. We're going to dive deep into Medicaid. We're going to dive deep into the VA, probably the most, and then creating an identity, and then what Paradigm can do to assist you with all these payer lines as we move forward. So one of the things that we talk about over and over again is diversification. Kind of the whys. Why do we need to diversify? You know, we can mitigate risk. So one of the things that we know, and one of the things that we've seen, and I worked with, I spent a week last week touring offices in Texas and having conversation with owners of different organizations. And across the board, every one of them told me that they do not see their private pay clients sticking around more than about an average of about 8 months. When I first started in this industry, Mom came on, she signed a contract with us. We had her as a private pay client, and for the next 15 years until she moved on in life or whatever her scenario was, she was a forever client. In today's world, between the cost of caregiver wages and the cost of providing services and the way rates have gone up in our economy and so on, we see clients moving into secondary facilities. We see them moving off of private duty home care, and we see a much bigger challenge in the private duty industry. Not that it's not the paramount piece of our business in this industry, it still is. But with diversification, we can mitigate some of those changes. When we look at Home Care Pulse's survey from last year in their benchmark study, they showed that private pay and live-in client hours were down by 26% nationally. Well, they have a huge footprint specifically in this industry. So if they're saying those hours are down 26% year over year, then we have to figure out a way to make up and mitigate some of that risk. From a profitability standpoint, the VA payer rates are much higher. They've come up over the past couple of years. The lowest rates in the United States are still significantly higher than most of our private pay rates. So even though we may have shorter hours, we're going to talk about that when we get into the presentation a little bit, even though we might have some differences going along there, the reality is that we can make money off of the VA because of the rates, because of the reimbursements, and because of our margins. When we start talking about diversification, and when we're talking to case managers, and when we're talking to social workers, and when we're out there in the world actually trying to sell our product, I'm increasing my referrals because now I can do multiple payer lines. If I'm only doing private pay and I'm only walking into a case manager's office and I say, look, I want all of your clients that can pay me $40 an hour. What does that do to create an opportunity for me to provide service across all lines and make me an advocate back for case managers, social workers, community organizations? I can have a much bigger footprint when I can do multiple payer lines. This falls right into competitive advantage. It gives me a competitive advantage over the people that don't want to do or can't do multiple payer lines. So again, understanding that becomes vital. And what do every one of us on this call and everybody on this planet are battling with? It's caregiver retention. It's why do caregivers stay? They stay for 3 reasons. You pay them, you give them work, and you're nice. Why do caregivers leave? You can't give them enough hours, you can't give them enough pay, and you're not nice. It's really pretty simple. It's not like, oh gosh, this is rocket science. You know, a lot of people say, well, we can't keep up with the box stores, we can't keep up with the Walmarts and so on. Our caregivers don't go to work for those agencies and those companies. Our caregivers go to work for other agencies. They bounce back and forth between the people that actually have hours, availability, and have work for them and have a competitive pay. You know, in my life of doing this, I can remember caregivers working for 4 or 5 agencies at a time. When I was a per diem nurse, I can remember working for 3 or 4 or 5 agencies in the critical care environment, whichever one had a shift for me. That's the one I took. So I've seen this firsthand, both as an employee, but also as an employer, and how the caregivers are spread across our industry, and we need to have work for them and ability. And then bottom line is that how can we impact our community? How do I become that agency or that group in the community that everybody looks to and says, oh my gosh, they helped my mom. Oh my gosh, they helped my dad, my brother, my sister, my aunt, my uncle. They're the company that stood out because they were providing services to my family members. So we're going to talk today about Medicaid and VA. So when we talk about these two opportunities, they're growing rapidly. They're expanding across our industry, and there's some massively underserved populations within both of these two payer sources. So let's just jump right into the veteran community. So one of the things we know is that there's over 16 million veterans living in the United States today. And when I start looking at numbers as we drop down through this, we're going to talk a little bit about eligibilities and things going on. But according to the VA's website, there's 8.4 million veterans currently listed on the VA's website at being veterans over the age of 65. And when we start looking at veterans, how many veterans have a service-connected disability, which when you have a service-connected disability, it makes you automatically eligible for home care benefits, no matter your income level, so on and so forth. There's over 4.5 million. And to go alongside that, or to go along with that, we know that according to the VA's numbers directly, when we met with them in Washington, D.C. this year, there's only 165,000 veterans getting home care in the United States across the entire industry. So when you start factoring this out and you start looking at numbers of eligible clients, so on and so forth, we estimate that they're providing care to less than 2% of the eligible population base. So how can we, as an industry and as a group, not help more veterans and leverage this underserved population and opportunity back to create a much larger opportunity to provide for care? So when we look at Medicaid and the expansion and where the hours are, this slide just jumps out to me incredibly. So when we look at last year, $3.4 trillion was spent on personal health care in our industry. Long-term supportive services, which is facilities, pulled in 57% of that. But 32% of 3.4 trillion was spent in long-term supportive services adult, which means hourly adult in-home care. Not doctor's offices, not visits, not physician fees, but hourly care paid back into our adult industry across the United States. 32% of $3.4 trillion was paid into our industry. So when we start looking at those numbers, we're going, oh my gosh, how can I not want to be a piece of 30% of 3.4 trillion? So one of the things that ever since I started in this industry, and ever since I started working in this industry, everybody has pounded into me. Margin, margin, margin. You have to have a 50% margin. You have to have margin, 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 margin. If you don't have margin, you can't do business. You have to have this amount of margin because it has to become profitable on the back end. But what is the actual income in dollars that we're addressing and we're looking at and we're seeing? So I would use a specific example. We're going to get into numbers and how to show that in a moment. But I actually had a conversation with a group, kind of like the one we're on now, but it was an interactive conversation with a number of agencies. And one of the agencies was kind of belittling the Medicaid platform in the state of Pennsylvania about how it's horrible and the reimbursements are terrible. And the people were operating on a margin in the mid-30s. And they were saying, you can't do business at that. And one of the owners popped on and told the other individual who said, you know, we've known each other for years, but I'd rather have my 6,000 hours a week of Medicaid at 32% than your 500 hours of private pay at 50. Because when you start factoring those numbers out and you actually look at a profitability, I'm making a lot more money depending upon how I manage my administrative burden on the back end than what you're making with your 50% margin. So understanding this, when we start moving past not just looking at margin, but looking at profitability, becomes a big piece of what we're talking about. So here's some numbers and kind of what we talked about. And I'm talking about just gross profit. I'm not talking about burden on the back end. I'm not talking about what burdens you more than others or whether you're dealing with EVV and all that. We're going to talk about how we can eliminate or alleviate some of that burden on the back end with Paradigm when we're done. But one of the things we want to talk about is just what are gross numbers? And here's what we know. The average hours per week on a Medicaid client are 40. So if I want to grow my business by $250,000 in gross profit per year, and I'm basing this on numbers. And so again, your numbers might be $6, they might be $13. Your gross profit for your VA, if you're in Wisconsin, might be $40. So again, I'm doing this off of just a simple calculation. So please don't say, oh my gosh, your numbers are different than mine. They might be. But we actually took this from specific offices and a specific study that gave us these numbers. So we looked at a 60-20-20 mix. So what would the perfect mix for you be? Would you want 50% or 60% of your business to be private pay? You know, I worked with an organization in a part of North Carolina for several years, and his problem was he had an entire area and region where the average fiscal income, the average income for the client base that he was looking at was in the 30,000s. It's like, Greg, my people can't afford $20 an hour, much less $25 an hour or $30 an hour. But he shifted his focus in that particular market to Medicaid and to the VA. And he's, over a 3-year period, his office is doing close to 5,000 hours because he looked at the niche and he looked at what the profitability was and he looked at where he was at, and he had 5 private pay clients after 2 years and was trying to make a living. And I got him to shift his focus, and look where he's at today, and he's doing incredibly well. So with all that being said, we have, in this particular scenario, we said, look, your Medicaid gross is $5, private pay 10, and VA 20. So as we can see here, to create these numbers, and with that percentage number, right, you're going to have add 5 Medicaid clients, 14 private pay clients, and 4 VA clients. What this tells me is that I have to have a 23 client, increase year over year to create, with this particular scenario, $250,000 in gross profit. But one of the things that we have to look at that becomes paramount when we're having these conversations is attrition. What we know is Medicaid clients stay on for 3 to 5 years. VA clients stay on a similar number. Private pay clients are turning over within a 12-month period. So even though I only had to add 14 private pay clients, if I'm going to have a 100% attrition, I'm going to have to add 28 clients. With Medicaid, I'm only going to add 1.5 more clients. With the VA, I'm going to add 1.5 more clients. Now, that same number of clients that I thought I had to add to increase my $250,000 in monies is actually 39. So instead of 23, I really have to have 39. But when I go to market and I want to go to do sales, and I'm talking to my marketing staff and I'm talking to my staffers and schedulers, if I tell them I have to have 39 clients, their heads are going to spin around and they're going to go nuts and they're going to say, oh my gosh, I can't do that. But if I tell them they have to add 3 a month, I need 1 client a week. I need to admit and start services to 1 client a week and 1 client a month in the VA and Medicaid combined. And I start saying 1 client and 1 at a time and 1 a month and 1 a week. I can get people to sell 1 client a week and 1 client a month. And now all of a sudden I've got, gosh, I really can create an environment to where I can grow to this $250,000 number of profit. And again, if I want to make it 500,000, I just have to double this number and continue to double and continue to double. And when you think about that, now all of a sudden it becomes a pretty astronomical number of clients. And again, we're talking gross profit. We're not talking about wages tossed in and all the above. So again, this can factor in. If I was in Wisconsin and my reimbursement was $84 for the VA, I might want this number of VA clients to be a much higher percentage. I might be working to move them bigger and stronger and faster, more in the VA than I would my private pay. But again, it just depends upon where you are, what's your niche, and how it affects you directly in your business. So when we start talking about the VA, we kind of talk about a couple of different programs, but the first one is Homemaker Home Health Aid and Respite. With the Home Health Aid and Respite program, this is the program in which a veteran qualifies for assistance with activities of daily living. That referral goes up to the VA hospital. They create a referral. It goes back out to the agency. They create how many number of hours that are being provided, so on and so forth. And this bill is paid for by the VA for services rendered. This is the group that has 165,000 in the entire United States getting care. But the number of hours available and the number of veterans of eligibility is much higher than this. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that is leveraged back as we go through. Aid and attendance pension. A lot of people run away from aid and attendance pension. They say, oh my gosh, the client can only have $155,000 in assets. They have to be basically be broke. They had to have served in specific times. Here's the key to this. With aid and attendance pension, a person can be getting VA benefits, getting VA hours, getting services through the VA, which is being paid by the VA, and still get aid and attendance pension as a stackable benefit. So if they were active duty during wartime, one day, in Vietnam, Korea, World War II, we don't have as many of those anymore, but also there's dates that are falling into some of the Desert Stormers now, which are falling into that age group, which would qualify for this benefit. It's now a pension. Just know, this is a pension paid to the veteran who served in active duty of a day during wartime. And there's stipulations and numbers and pieces in that, but they can stack this benefit as a private pay client on top of their other VA benefits. So last year in March, our current administration put out an administrative directive or a order that said we want to expand our family caregiver program to allow for family members to be the primary giver of care, and they're hired by the VA, they're employed by the VA, and they provide care to the client who needs help. Now, to qualify for the family caregiver program, the veteran has to be at least 70% disabled by the VA. So there's a significant stipulation. So if they don't have a 70% disability under their VA benefits, they're not going to be able to use their family member. If they do, their family member gets hired by the VA, and this care gets provided directly by the family member, whoever that primary caregiver is. Now, when I first saw this come out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to take hours out of the pockets of our home care companies and our agencies, and this is terrible because I'm not a big fan of consumer-driven models in general. But if you see the bolded blue at the bottom of the screen, one of the things that's key and paramount to this is these clients get a minimum of 30 days respite per year. So the family member is now the primary caregiver. They're an employee of the VA. They're no longer working with an agency. But if they want respite time, that respite is provided back through you. And those are 30 days minimum. There is no maximum number. The number of hours are allocated back to the veteran family member directly by the case management group at the hospital. Key example, in our clients in Tucson, Arizona, we see an average respite hours coming out to our clients in this program of about 21 hours a week. They're actually being allocated by case management. They're giving family members higher levels of respite than they were actually giving clients for caregivers. I had a client in Cheyenne, Wyoming last year who the primary caregiver was the 72-year-old spouse. Fell and broke their hip. That client received 24-hour-a-day authorization, 7 days a week, for a 9-month authorization for respite care. The agency's billing at $59 and some change under their state rate for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So this program is something that you can enhance and help. How can you do that? So the VA, in creating this family caregiver program, is also mandated to give caregiver support services. What are those? They're peer mentoring, skills training, online resources, telephone support, referrals. Well, the VA doesn't have a structure in place to do this. So what do? They have online courses for caregivers to take on ADLs and things of this nature, activities of daily living. So how can you teach? And I actually said, how do you teach a 72-year-old caregiver online? And a client told me yesterday, I'm 72 years old. That's not a great response. But the reality is, I'm 65 and you couldn't train me on this platform. If you were trying to train me online, I would struggle to learn how to use a Hoyer lift or how to do ADLs in an online course. So I don't think it matters your age. I just think it's not a realistic way to do it. But it gives you an opportunity to go to the VA and say, who's managing your family caregiver program? What case managers are managing these clients? My offices and my agency can assist with peer support. I can send a caregiver out to help them learn how to do ADLs. We can help them with this source. Are you being paid for that benefit? No. But you're engaging your community. You're helping with the veteran client. And if you're out teaching the wife or the husband how to do ADLs and you spend 4 hours doing a mentorship, who are they going to give their 30 plus days of respite to? They're not going to give them to a separate party. They're going to give them the people that have gone there to be a part of their organization. So veteran-directed care. I'm not a massive fan. And the reason I'm not such a big fan is I'm not a big fan of consumer-driven models. But within this platform, basically what's happening is the VA is telling veterans, hey, you can manage your own care. You can provide your own, hire anybody you want. You go out and hire somebody. You have a third-party broker that manages their funds, and you get to pay your caregivers $20 an hour, and that comes directly from the VA. They turn their timesheets into this other organization, and they get a paycheck, and you manage who you hire, when they come to work, and all the challenges associated with that. It sounds good for the veteran. It sounds good for the VA because they're reducing overhead costs by reducing this piece. But who's responsible for this caregiver? What happens if the caregiver falls in the home? Do they have a rider on their home insurance policy that allows for caregiving in the home? What happens if somebody takes their belongings? What happens if they don't show up for work? We already know we're challenged with caregivers. What makes them think that they can go to care.com and find the perfect person that they can pay for, that they don't have to use an agency any longer? I can't count how many people have moved into this program, have failed, have then said, hey, I want an agency to manage my hours. They kick the program right back over to the other side, and it goes back over to the Homemaker Home Health Aid Respite Program. The authorization gets sent out to the agency, and they provide caregivers and manage their hours. So it's there. Everyone should know about it. But there's actually opportunity when caregivers aren't meeting the client's needs, and those hours can be pushed back to an agency. So Medicaid has a massive opportunity. Across every state in the United States, there's opportunity. There's waiver programs. They're uniquely structured state by state. There's a massive untapped revenue. When we start looking at states, I would use Indiana as a great example. You know, last year their rate was at $24 and $25 and some change for reimbursement. In less than a year, that went to $35 and some change. Now, everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon because they want to provide Medicaid. What's happening now? All those organizations that would not do Medicaid before at the $24 an hour or $25 an hour are finding that the network is saturated and they can't get into network and they can't provide that care at now the $36 an hour. So looking at, can I do business at $25 an hour? Can I do it on high volume? Is it a real good business market for me? You have to measure that out on a site-by-site basis. And even if I do 10% of my business or 4% of my business, the reality is that it sets me up for a positive on the back end when I'm impacting my community because I'm providing care under multiple different payer lines. So when we start looking at states with Medicaid programs and how many people are actually receiving care and the numbers and so on within the private care sector, these are just some numbers out there that are kind of flooring to a lot of people. But, you know, California with 13.3 million people receiving care, Texas with 7.2, New York at 6.1, and on and on I could go down. We're seeing reimbursement increases in most of these states. California has just moved into a program called CalAIM. CalAIM is taking the Medicaid platform and moving it under managed care organization. There's about 25 of them, including Kaiser, which are now managing that platform. So now they have to be credentialed with and with the CalAIM program. They've increased that to $35 to $37 an hour. Caregivers are making about 20. So is it worth exploring at that margin? Again, it goes back to, okay, so when I throw in burdens, so on and so forth, now I'm making $10 an hour, but I'm getting 40 plus hour a week clients. I was in Connecticut at the Home Care Association of America, and I sat next to an owner just on Monday when we were having this conversation, and she says, I have 135 Medicaid clients. It's the only thing I do is Medicaid. But I have clients that are getting 70 to 80 hours a week. And we're making all this up on volume on the back end. So it really depends upon your Medicaid program and your opportunity. And for those of you that are doing the VA or tried to do the VA or got stuck in the VA somewhere along the way, have realized that, oh gosh, I didn't get in when I had an opportunity and now I can't. So one of the things I say over and over again is look at the potential to keep away from the mitigation of problems in the future and look to expand while you can. And expanding your business through third party becomes a big piece of that. So some of the challenges that come about from Medicaid, and I think, you know, we used to always say, oh my gosh, Medicaid problems or Medicaid issues or Medicaid things. Well, can we turn the challenges within that to opportunities to expand on our marketplace and stay, for instance, staying ahead of state regulations. One of the things that, you know, here at Paradigm we do and other agencies assist as well is, you know, what's happening with the state? When are changes coming about? What's happening on a month-by-month basis? When you know these things and you're looking at it and you're saying, what's happening, what's coming out in new, when you're using your state organizations or your home care associations, what are the trends? What's going on? What's happening? What are the move forward? What are the move backs? EVV and automations to systems. You know, I know there's an RFP or there's been discussions of an RFP to switch the VA to EVV and have all government programs require electronic visit verification. I think there's opportunity to manage those and understand those and stay ahead of record keeping and have quality care and eliminate some of the fraud and abuse that goes on in the system by having electronic visit verification. Timely billing, staying on top of it, having those things, being ahead of them, knowing what the state regulations are, knowing these things, being ahead of it sets you up to have positive outcomes because now you're talking to referral sources and you're actually getting your billing on time and your record keeping's quality and all these things. They refer more to you and they push more to you than the one that's saying, I don't do this. And when I did it poorly and it got rejections and things going on. Reducing claim denials, staying ahead of documentation actually eliminates and alleviates administrative burden, creates a positive workflow. The organization that I'm working with in Pennsylvania that does 6,000 hours of Medicaid runs their revenue cycle through us. They're doing 6,000 hours of Medicaid and they have 3 office staff, because they're able to eliminate that burden through automating processes, staying ahead of their EVV, using family caregivers, which they're allowed to use in 46 of the 50 states under Medicaid. So they're utilizing this to eliminate administrative burden, whether it's utilizing Paradigm or not. The whole idea is becoming proficient and understanding these pieces and parts of the platform. Eliminating administrative burden allows you to pick up more of these hours on what might be a lower gross margin, but a higher profitability, and still expand your business and eliminate risk. So one of the things that I talk about over and over again when I have conversations with owners and agencies and pieces and parts out there is How do I actually grow my business? How do I take my expertise and leadership and create a voice that's unique to me? And how do I prioritize quality, amplify my message, and change it up to what it has been to what I want it to be? And I'm going to jump into that a little bit before I get into the next slide, because I want to talk a little bit about creating that message. So when I walk into an independent living, or I walk into an assisted living, or I walk into a skilled home care, or I walk into a different organization, my message is not the same every place I go. But what I don't want my message to be is, oh my gosh, did you see how amazing we are because we have 400 franchises across the country and we're the best at what we do. The best at what? At best at my caregivers making toast? Do I have the best background checks? Case managers, social workers, community organizations, even though those things add to quality, that's not what they're looking for from your agency. I want to create a message that I can help your clients transition into where they need to be, whether that's home from the acute care hospital, understanding how to provide the skills that they need to remain independent, to stay at home, to eliminate or alleviate rehospitalizations, have a better quality of life at home by meeting the client where they are. Am I working with a skilled rehab to understand, I know you have clients that need Hoyer lift training and slide board training and swallow issues with people that have had strokes so that they can work with speech. My caregivers are going to meet clients where they are to maintain the fact that they can do better getting home and have longer care. Guess what? When you're doing this with a VA client, it's free care. Now I'm selling the ability for one of the 18 million veterans out there to be getting free services that can help them with these transitions to safe at home. When I'm talking about somebody in independent living, I'm not talking about how they can go home. I could talk about how they can stay there, how they can remain independent, how they can have a better quality of life. Rather than Greg going down to the dining room looking disheveled and like he hasn't had a shower in 3 days and wearing the same clothes, he's coming down with his hair not in a mess. He's coming down with clean clothes on. And all of a sudden, everybody there wants a Susie. Everybody wants that caregiver that helped him to get to that point. So I'm creating quality of care message around what I do, and I'm taking it away from, I'm not walking into a building with a pocket full of pens. Leave your pens at home and take your message. That's what I just say over and over again. Take the opportunity to grow your business through your message and your capabilities as an agency, leveraging these third-party payers as an opportunity that this is free care. Is it going to expand your private pay business? Absolutely, because when I'm doing a good service for one piece, it's going to add to the other. If I'm the go-to for a case manager with everything with a VA, and I'm a go-to for the case manager with everything for Medicaid, what do you think they're going to do with their private pay client? They're not going to turf it to somebody else. They're going to go, I'm going to be the go-to for that piece of business. So expanding your network by expanding your message and making sure that your message is one of meeting clients where they are, expanding your portfolio through that, and doing a better job. So Paradigm is a company. So we do a lot of things. And this, when you look up here, it says over 2,500 providers trust Paradigm to automate and simplify their processes. I can tell you we're over 3,000. Okay. We add about 150, give or take a couple a month, on an average of companies that come over to work with us. So what do? We automate and streamline your billing. We work with companies like SwyftOps to be able to grab your billing information, grab the information from Medicaid, grab the information from the VA, manage these authorizations, put all this together, and push back out your billing first run, appropriate, correct, so you're not working off of rejections. We help you to enroll and to give you support into payer networks. So we're helping to enroll people into Medicaid programs, into the VA, into state programs as they go across. So we're helping to understand, either giving you support in how to enroll, or actually in some cases able to do your enrollment depending upon the payer source. So again, we give support to help you expand down these third-party lines. We manage your authorizations and client eligibilities. We run client eligibilities on all your Medicaid clients. So you never should have a client that drops out of eligibility so you get a rejection in payment or stop of services. We stay ahead of those through eligibility checks. We pull your authorizations right out of the VA system and HSRM, and we match that up to your actual auth, which is in your system, to make sure they're correct and appropriate. And as far as historical collections, we used to be able to do them. We did them a lot. But what we're finding is people that were billing in the past, if you're not within the 180-day range, we're seeing rejections. So staying ahead of rejections because of timely filing, we don't have. We don't have timely filing issues because we stay ahead of it. And then at the end of all of the above, we have an incredible team. Melissa, myself, we have several other members that actually will do one-on-one training with you in your office. We'll help you create a marketing action plan to grow your business. We'll help you create messaging that you can use in PowerPoints. If I want to take a PowerPoint and go to an assisted living, if I want to go to an independent living, if I want to go to a community center. In the past 2 weeks, I've done a community center, and I went and did a visit and did a presentation for a community center in Denton, Texas. I'm going to Houston next week to a community center. I just had somebody in Virginia that wants to have somebody come in and do a training for one of their community centers early in the fall. I do regional meetings. We do these things to actually help you to expand your business and do on-site with you. But in the meantime, we'll get on a call with you and we'll break down an actual marketing action plan. Then how to hold your people and your staff and yourselves accountable to that plan on the back end. Because the reality is you can create all the plans you want. You can create all this, but if you're not keeping yourself accountable to it or doing some kind of accountability, they'll always fail. So we help you to create a plan and then help you to show you how to become accountable to that plan on the back end. So we have the ability to do this start to finish, and all the things we talk about in this meeting, we can do a deep dive into what's happening in your market specific, what's happening to you. So you can schedule with us, create with us, and we do these, and it's all part of the same platform. So our revenue is generated off of a percentage of billing, but all these other pieces and parts and so on are ancillary services that are created to help you to grow your business and help you grow moving forward.